Yeah.
Welcome back again.
Welcome back. Welcome back. It's like we just did this, right? We were up and running yesterday, did the live stream with Don Gleason, and now we got a special guest, Nick Palmesano. Palmesano, right? So,
Right.
John, if you want to kick that video, man, and we'll get right into Nick's story and talking to him a little bit.
Yep, I got you.
Oh yeah.
I'm here to pick up my DD-214 and become a civilian.
In the military, they say that 10 minutes early is on time, and on time is late.
The newest member of the Gas Dog family, Joe Hauser.
Team at Gasoline Dog Media hired me right out of the military, and I want to prove I am worth the risk.
I hate him.
Hate him. I hate him.
Just a constant nuisance.
Moron thinks he can step to me.
Kind of feels like the Army.
You didn't succeed in the Army by being like other people. You embraced what you were good at and you doubled down on it. That is what made you an exceptional soldier.
You're a jumper in the door of a C-130, baby, and that mission's coming.
This kite will keep us going for the rest of the year. I want a campaign.
So you're trying to take out a meme page?
We just really need the money.
It looks like old Gasoline Dog is really circling the drain.
It may seem like a cute little media company from the outside, but from the inside, it's a festering sore.
I had a bunch of new coworkers who are all a little insane and would never hang out with each other under any other circumstances than this job.
They get dumber and dumber every year. I don't know where they're finding, bro.
We pay them barely over minimum wage.
Oh, I love that.
I'm sure that everything is different in the military.
They don't get my jokes. They don't get me. No one's in danger. No one's dying.
What you're experiencing is no different than what every veteran goes through.
I can't believe you have the audacity to even come at me.
Ninjas were the special operations of their time.
You've turned in the uniform, but you're still carrying around that invisible rucksack.
So I need to remember what it was like to be a new sergeant?
Lead them, Joe.
You guys talk a big game. You never deliver. It's not about me. It's about each other.
We want to crush flies. We want to destroy them. We want to go to their homes, insult the thieves.
That's the literal definition of a war crime.
This is ridiculous. You're not going to get away with this.
You're hot or cold, hot or cold. You're hot, hot.
This is a Benedict Arnold. Brutus stabbing Caesar.
Am I afraid of being sunk to the bottom of the ocean? Fuel always floats to the top.
It's survival of the fittest, Lucius. And we're the fit.
You know what? Maybe it's not so bad here.
All right. Welcome to the stage, Nick Palmesano. Hey, welcome, Nick.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Dude, I started watching the show in preparation for this podcast here, and I'm pretty much hooked on it, right? It's like
That's great.
I love the camera angles and how everything zooms in, right? And just the interaction with folks, especially when the guy opens the fridge.
Yep.
He's staring at him with the soda.
Yep.
I rewound that and showed my kid, man. That was awesome, man. So
Yeah.
So yeah, Nick, man, just give me a little bit of background on you, man. Like what I know offline a little bit. We talked that you grew up in Italy, and then
I grew up in Italy till I
go
was
ahead.
middle school age. How far back do you want me to go? Like, how deep?
No. I guess let's go like quickly where you grew up, and then tell me about your time in the military.
Yeah. Am I allowed to swear on this? I just need to know that in advance. Am I good?
I do it all the time, man. Why not?
Okay. All right. Okay. I just want to I'll try not to, but just in case. Grew up in Italy till middle school. Came to just outside of Boston, and basically got my butt kicked for a couple of years. So decided to start combat sports. I'm old, so Karate Kid 2 was at its peak around this period of time, and wanted to do karate, but my mom was like, karate's 45 minutes away and judo's only 15. So at the time I was mad, but in retrospect, it was a gift. So anyway, that led to wrestling, and that led to a desire to do hard things, which kind of teed me up for West Point. And that's how I joined the military. My dad was a Vietnam vet, and he recommended that I look at West Point, and never anticipated going there, but that's kind of how I got hooked. So then spent 6 years as an infantry officer, and when I got out, I landed in like the easiest transition possible, which was I went to grad school at Duke University, right?
Mm.
Nobody should feel bad for me. I'm not sitting here whining about it. It was still hard. It was still stressful. Just as I got out, one of my favorite soldiers was killed in combat. One of my best friends, had taken over, and he was injured. And so, I'm sitting there going like, man, did I make the right decision? All the stupid thoughts you have, like if I was still in, would it be different? It wasn't. Like my friend Jared legitimately was a much better officer than I was. So it's not like, but you go through all those thoughts, and I landed in a great job. I had a Fortune 100 gig, was making more than anybody in my family ever made, and it was the worst I've ever felt in my life. And so to kind of combat that, I started a hobby with one of my buddies, and that hobby was like the first military apparel brand called Ranger Up. Mm-hmm. And ended up quitting my corporate gig, almost bankrupting myself trying to start Ranger Up, and that turned into an 8-figure business and kind of like the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I sold that company, and at the 1-year mark, that was the end of my contractual obligation after I sold it to stay with them. And that was the same time that like COVID was hitting. And so they were like, hey, we're going to do a layoff. And I was like, well, my time is kind of up anyway. So I was like, hey, instead of laying off anybody, I'll just leave and do my next thing. I had a gig lined up at a mid-cap kind of company where I was going to come in and be the CMO for a while and not have to be the guy in charge for a change. And well, they made the decision, well, if you're leaving, then we're going to lay off everybody. And so that happened. And I basically came in. They made that decision. I came in and said, hey, guys, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is you're all getting laid off next Friday. And they were like, well, shit, what's the good news? I was like, well, the good news is if you want a job, you can have one at my new company. They were like, what's that? I'm like, I'll tell you on Monday. So I went home and called some buddies, and like, I was like, hey, what do you think I'm really good at? I just asked a bunch of people because sometimes you like, you don't really know, like you think but they're like, you're really good at writing, you're really good at marketing, and you like being stupid and silly on the internet. And so that's how Diesel Jack Media was formed. And we have some incredible clients, to include the American Legion, Student Veterans of America, a whole bunch of for-profit organizations. And the vision was always to eventually make our own stuff, similar to the movie at the very end of Ranger Up. I did a movie called Range 15 that I did with the guys that at the time owned a company called Article 15, but now own Black Rifle Coffee. And so we did that movie together. It was Ranger Up and Article 15, Range 15. That's where the name came from. And that was the first independent film ever to go to #1 on Amazon. So that was our claim to fame on that. And so as I was getting into about 1 year into Diesel Jack, the fall of Afghanistan occurred, and I was sitting down, finishing up a book with Tim Kennedy. And Chad Robichaud and Sarah Verardo called us kind of at the same time and asked if we'd be willing to go to Afghanistan to help with the withdrawal. I thought it was a joke because, I was 45, 46 at the time. I wasn't that cool when I was in the military. I'm certainly not cool now. But I'm a known quantity I've done a few things here and there for, just kind of helping out. And, Sarah basically trusted that I would be helpful and not screw anything up. And so after asking my wife, I had the opportunity to go over with about a dozen dudes, most of them much, much cooler than I am, agency guys, special operations guys. And through a series of very weird events, one of our friends, this guy by the name of Joe Robert, had a great connection to the Emirates. And so the Emirates donated not only space for us to bring people, but they donated 2 C-17s. And then we started having real efficacy there. And once kind of word got out that we had a place to bring people, and we were being effective in removing, huge numbers of people that were kind of trapped. Mercury One, Glenn Beck's nonprofit, reached out and said, "What do you need?" And we said, more airframes. And so they essentially leased 3 Cam Air 737s, which, some of which, like, our guys on the ground had to fix, which is not something you want to hear. But then we had 5 airframes running. And so, by the end of it, we had moved about 12,000 people, just shy of 9,000 to the Emirates, and then another almost 3,000 at the request of USG to Qatar. And so what started as like a weird phone call where I thought I was going to kind of, pitch in here and there, ended up being like 12 middle-aged dudes, evacuating 12,000 people, or about 11% of everybody that got out. And it was nuts. It was nuts. And, once again, like I always have to be super clear. I did nothing heroic. The people that were doing the crazy stuff were, Sean G was the name he prefers to go by publicly. Seaspray, the name he prefers to go by publicly. And Tim Kennedy were the ones that were physically going outside the wire over and over again. I was loading planes, building manifests, doing S3 kind of shit. But it was very honored to be a part of it. And I always look at that period of time as the one time I can remember the entire veteran community coming together to do the right thing. Like, whether you were, we had Vietnam vets helping. We had people like, whether they were sitting on a couch, kind of making phone calls and building Excel files and pictures and documentation to send to people, or, like the Pineapple Express guys that had connections to, SOF guys on the ground, and they were coordinating efforts there, or people like us that were very fortunate to have the ability to be physically on the ground. Everybody kind of pitched in. So it was a horrific and cool moment, all at the same time. And, then I got back. And since then, I've spent time in Pakistan, kind of putting together safe houses, Ukraine, Haiti, the Haitian border. And members of our team have been, in Israel and Syria, et cetera. And that organization became Save Our Allies. But at the time, it was called Task Force 6-8. Anyway, I get back to client work, and kind of had the realization that it's been rough for veterans for a while. What's the last good news we've had? So there were a lot of hard moments when we essentially left Iraq, and then Afghanistan was our generation's Vietnam. And so I was like, what? Like, what am I coming back to? Like, what am I good at? I like to make veterans laugh. That's my gift. I'll leave the hero stuff to everyone else, but I think I'm pretty good at that. And so I reached out to all my friends and just said, hey, I'm thinking about, I don't want to redo Range 15. Like, we did that. That was dark, and, it was really dark humor, unapproachable to regular human beings. But I want to make a show that talks about something that was hard for me, which was transition. And I know that if it was hard for me, where I had that soft landing, it's going to be hard for everyone else. And, when you think about everybody that's taken their lives, or everyone that's in crisis, or everyone that, we all have friends, we've all gone through it. It's that weird moment where you go from, my job is to protect the country, to what's my purpose? Is it to make money? Is it to kind of get through life? Is it like, what do I do? And then, you go from having 30, 40 people around you that are looking out for you, even when you do stupid things. Like, you had guys that get arrested for fighting, or they spend all their money on the second, but they're not starving because there's a group of people around them. Well, that whole tribe is gone. They're not really gone, but they're not physically present anymore. And so, the show is ridiculous and it's funny. And I was able to bring in, Jared Taylor and, Austin Von Letkeman, who goes by Mandatory Fun Day, and Ashley Gutermuth and Tim Kennedy and Vince Vargas and all these people. And they're fantastic talents. But the underpinning of the show is military transition. It's hard, but everybody goes through it, and you'll get through it too, is kind of like the message. And so, knocked out season 1, mostly through self-funding, some support from the American Legion, which, I say all the time, I was really surprised, but as my relationship with the Legion grows, I've realized that they want to meet veterans where they are, not like in some ivory tower where, they think veterans should be. And so they came on board and supported the effort, and that was really cool to see. And so highly recommend people join the Legion, because they need the help, and it's, like, honest to God, the best organization you can imagine.
Yeah.
There's my spiel. How'd I do?
So Nick, I wanted to ask you, man, I know the show, Office Joe, it's about military transition, and we talk a lot about that here on this show, because it is tough. It is an uphill battle. There's a mixture of loss of tribe and camaraderie, and what am I going to do next? What's my next purpose, passion, mission? I want to ask you, like, personally, what was your uphill battle when it came to military to civilian transition?
Yeah. So my uphill battle was that I didn't. So how many times when you were in the military did you hear people say something like, when I get out, I'm going to make money, or like almost like there was some sacrifice by serving, and there was like some greener pasture somewhere else. And I got out and I did that, and I did that for a few years, and I had more money. Like, it was like I didn't have to check the bank account. There was just always money. And I was miserable. And like, I realized, like, I am not motivated by money. Listen, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to, have to worry about eating. Yeah. But I literally realized, like, I need nothing. I don't want anything. I wear this V-neck black t-shirt. I literally own 20 of these. I wear it every day. I wear the same pants, the same short. Like, I have no.
Did we just become best friends, man? Because I got the same thing.
I got my black t-shirt on too.
I have no earthly desires. There's nothing that, like, I want, like, in terms of stuff. I like to do cool things. I like to help people. That's what makes me feel good. And I like to make film. I like to make comedies. I like to make serious films. And so, it's like this, like, I want to make people laugh was almost how Ranger Up started, because I wasn't thinking at any point, I'm going to leave this corporate gig. And when I did decide that, like, my friends, my family, like, everybody I knew was like, "You're fucking stupid." No, it was beyond what are you doing? It was like,
Boston, right?
It was like, bro, you got good grades in high school to go to West Point, then you got in the military, then you got to Duke, then you got the job, like, you did the thing you're supposed to do. Miserable. I was miserable. And my life has been way harder since I made that. Like, starting a business the first time, almost bankrupted myself probably twice. This business, right? We're in a recession, regardless of what anybody thinks, and so, or says, and so tons of companies have pulled back on marketing. Like, this stuff is hard, but the challenge of it, and especially when I get to do work for somebody like the American Legion or Student Veterans of America, or, Warrior Rising, like some of these great organizations, like, my motivation is like, oh, I can help them. I can bring them members. I can get more people involved. I can grow their programs. So, I get a lot of reward out of that. And, legitimately, I do not make as much money now. And I'm not complaining because I've been very fortunate, but I know what I could have made and what I was making and the path I was on. And it's not the same, but I wouldn't trade it for anything because my life has meaning, and everybody has a different meaning. But I think it's critically important to happiness that you figure out what it is that you need to make your life have meaning. And I have friends that for them, the meaning is money. Like that's their scorecard on life. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I have friends that, they just want to be in the nonprofit world and they want to help as many people as possible. And they can live in a 1-bedroom apartment and not care about it. And then I have other friends where it's like, they'll do anything for their family. As long as their family they'll make any sacrifice. As long as their family is good, they're happy. And so you got to figure out what that is. And that's super hard. And the other thing that veterans suck at is asking for help.
Oh, yeah.
I have literally never had, gone to, I guess onesie, twosie, there are people that are not super helpful, but I have never made, how about this? I've never made 2 phone calls where somebody wasn't willing to help me.
Yeah, I can see that.
And sometimes that's advice and sometimes that's investment and sometimes that's, whatever. But, we tend to think if we can't figure it out ourselves, then we're weak or we're not good or we're not strong or we're not whatever. But then we forget, I'll use Ranger School as an example. Yes, Ranger School is an individual task in that you have to suck it up yourself, right? You have to be the one that does that, passes your own patrols and whatever. But you cannot get through Ranger School as an individual. There's a squad around you, and then there's a platoon around you, and then there's all these things. And then, you think about deployment. Like I know when I deployed, it wasn't like me standing on a hill. Literally, as the platoon leader, I was the least important guy when you really take a step back. All the contributions that everybody else made and what they had to do in order for success. And, that's the way the military was, right? It was a team effort. Like, yes, we had to be individually tough, but, I didn't know how to do most of the things when I got to my first platoon. And I had a great guy called the platoon sergeant that was there to help me along the way. And squad leaders that had never been squad leaders before had that same guy, and they had the senior squad leaders and team leaders that, and on and on and on. But we, for some reason, remember it as it was me. I had to take on these challenges. Well, that whole crew is still around, and they're, even though veterans, on occasion have been known to eat their own, most veterans are not like that. And so, when you're trying to do something, the best thing you can do is reach out to people and kind of get advice. Like, how do I build an audience? How do I start a company? What do I need to know? What's the best software to use for accounting? Like all things that, why would you know that if you've never done that before?
Right.
And that's why I talk to veterans all the time. People I don't know, as long as they seem like decent human beings, I'll give people my time and try to educate them on, on all of the things that I've had to learn through failure.
I want to pick something apart in there that you said, and just to get your kind of advice on it, maybe for my own personal benefit, but also for the people out there listening. When you started to go down these paths, these entrepreneurial paths, starting a business, starting a media company, when did you know immediately that it was time to go all in, or did you have a moment where it just clicked and you're like, okay, cool, I know this might turn out to be complete dead end and burn all my cash in one go, but this is what I'm going all in on? Like, what was the kind of the trigger for that?
So that's a decision every person has to make individually. But I'm going to answer that kind of how I am a high risk person, and I've been told that my whole life. I'm not like people that I think are amazing. Like I look at Elon Musk pushing all in with he just made $90 million off of PayPal and literally putting all of it into 2 giant business ideas without any concern for failure. I'm not that cool, but I very much take the approach that life is very short, and I would rather die broke than die regretting not trying something and wondering like if I can do it. And sometimes that means like I failed and I couldn't do it, but then I know the answer.
Right.
So that is my starting point, and everybody has a different starting point. But for me, with Ranger Up, it wasn't meant to be what I did. That wasn't my goal. And so it was a hobby. And then it started making money. And then I hired my first employee. And I think I got up to having 2 or 3 employees before I jumped ship. And so what was happening is it was growing, but I always felt like if I was physically there during my good hours, because you can only be productive for so many hours a day. And so I was working from 8 to 6 for a Fortune 100 company in a pretty intense job. And then I'd get home, I'd have dinner, and then I would work from 7:30, 8 to 1, 2 in the morning. And then I was, so I wasn't giving my best hours to it. And I thought that maybe it had legs. And so, the impetus for me was I found out I was getting a promotion, which would be a really significant raise. And I knew that if I took that, I'd have more responsibility, so more hours, and the money would be so good that I would never be able to easily replace it. And it's hard to go from being comfortable to being uncomfortable. So I had this massive anxiety that if I don't jump ship now, I am going to be a Fortune 100 guy forever. And I knew that I didn't want to be. So that was the impetus for me. Everybody has to make their own decision. So for some people, I highly recommend that they slowly go into entrepreneurship and they slowly, kind of do that handoff. Some people should only be part-time entrepreneurs. The stress is too much because I am so good now at catastrophic situations because I've had so many. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time now, almost 2 decades. And so, for me, it's like, oh, the building's on fire and this happened and whatever. I've kind of seen every iteration of that. So it's easier to stay calm and not have it ruin my life. But, when things are bad and you're an entrepreneur, it's all you think about. You go, there's no break.
Oh, yeah, that's your life. Yeah.
That's your life. Yeah. That's why I love jujitsu and grappling arts, because when somebody's trying to choke you, you can't worry. You can't think about, oh God, I've got to make payroll, because you just think I got to get this guy off my neck. And silly as it sounds, having an hour and a half of that every once in a while goes a long way towards mental health. But I think the biggest thing is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to be willing to suffer. There's almost no one I've ever seen that keeps the same standard of living through that transition. Mm-hmm. So you have to be willing to not have as much, not be able to spend as much. And typically for most people, that's not actually an issue. It's not an issue. It's not that they need the cars or the house or the clothes. It's that they suffer the illusion that people give a shit whether they have the house or the cars or the clothes.
Who do you have that for? Yourself or to show it off?
That's right. And there's nothing wrong with wanting it if you want it. But what I whenever I'm talking to people that are, especially people that are very worried about this, tend to be people that are in their, kind of under 35. There's usually a transition that happens sometimes between 35 and 50, where you realize hey, I'm moving pretty far along in this life, and I don't really give a shit what other people are doing. Right. Maybe they don't care what I'm doing also. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I tell people all the time, nobody cares about you. And it's not like like Vic, if you called me tomorrow, even though we just met, if you called me tomorrow and you were like, hey man, I'm going through it, can you help? I would help if I could. That being said, right? Like, let's say you called me and you were like, man, I don't know what, like, I know you went through a divorce. I want to talk about my divorce. I would give you time. I'd talk you through it or whatever. But then when I got off the phone, maybe I'd say to my wife, oh man, Vic's going through a divorce right now. That, I really feel for him. But then I'd be like, okay, I got to run my business. I got to take my kids to wrestling. I got to, and I'm going through my list.
Yep.
I'm not thinking like about Vic because I don't have time and my life is moving along.
Right.
And that's true for everyone. Only people that are unhealthy are obsessing about other people. And I don't care what about those people anyway. So as soon as you start thinking like, man, actually no one cares about me, it sounds negative. And at first you might have this like, oh man, but it's incredibly freeing. Then it's like, I can do whatever I want because there really is no scorecard. It's just time. I have, if I'm lucky, 80 years. If I'm not lucky, 60 years. If I'm really, unlucky, could be tomorrow on the way home, what do I want to do at that time?
Do you think that that's what holds people back from doing what they want to do? Is that the fact that they care what
100%.
people think about them?
Yeah, because let's take a step back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong. There are people that are homeless and have, that have issues like, they are addicted to drugs or they've fallen on really hard times or there's a healthy, I don't want to like get into this semantic argument of like nobody can fail. But let's say John, tomorrow you say like, I'm going all in on this nonprofit endeavor, right? What is the worst thing that can happen?
Lose everything.
You lose everything, right? Declare bankruptcy. Does that mean at the end of that, okay, you lose your house, you lose your money or whatever. Day one after bankruptcy, can you get a job?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you still have all the skills you had before?
Yeah, that and the experience of losing all my money.
And the experience of losing all your money. So now you have skills that you never had before. You know what not to do. You've gone through something. Now, in a few years, you'll have credit again. In 7 years, it'll all be erased. So if you really think about it, 7 years, it seemed like a long time when we were 20, but it's nothing. So the worst thing that happens is you have like, it's embarrassing for a little while, but like, if you were like, man, I had to declare bankruptcy because I went for it. And, like me as an entrepreneur that has been through it, do you think I'm judging you? No, because I've almost been there. Like, I'm like, hell yeah, man. Like, you did it. You went for it. Shit happens. Like, get back on the horse. How can I help? And the only people that might judge you are people that have never done it. People that have no idea how hard it is to run a business, have no idea the risk you have to take, have no idea what it's like to have your own money on the line. Oh, and why would you care what they think? They haven't been in the arena.
Right.
And anybody that's been in the arena is going to respect you for taking the shot and will probably be more likely to hire you because the pain of defeat. And anybody that is criticizing you has probably never done it. So like, again, we're back at this, and they don't care about you anyway. You're just you might be like a 5-minute conversation. So what are we even talking about? What do you want to do? And that's like how I think about everything. So, with Office Joe, it's like, man, I want to make a TV series. I don't want it to just be a movie. I want to be characters I can keep investing in. And we've had great early success. The show's been out for, right now it's only out for sale on Amazon, on Apple, and on Google Play. We hope to at some point, have a permanent home somewhere. But we've had thousands of people at this point buy it, and we've got like a 9.2 on IMDb and a perfect 5-star on Amazon, and people are really enjoying it. And so I'm incredibly excited about it. But this is a really weird thing. I had no preconceived notion of how it was going to go. you want it to do well. You hope people love it. You hope it's appreciated. But I purposefully have removed the idea that I have to get a particular result out of the work that I do now. Because I find that my work is less good if I'm worried about the result all the time. And I also have found that when you set a result, it's very easy to judge something a success or a failure and have no satisfaction. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but if you, let's say, you say, hey, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, and you get to 30 and you only have $950,000. If you are results oriented, you're like, I'm a fucking failure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, if you have 2 million, you're going to go, I thought I'd feel different.
It's never enough, huh?
It's never enough
Never
when it's
enough.
only about results. You are perpetually unhappy. And so, and I used to think that way. I mean, I used to think that, like, I was a very passionate grappler in my youth. I was a very good wrestler. I did not exactly hit my goals, even though I was, I had an extremely successful career, but I didn't get what I wanted. And without, not that you guys want to hear about my wrestling stories, but I'll just put it this way. I got to the point where when I left wrestling, I actually didn't want to talk about the sport, didn't like the sport, because I had said, I'm going to do these things, and I didn't quite get to those things, even though I came close. My battalion commander forced me to be the wrestling coach for Gießen High School in Germany, because the chaplain's kid, Jonathan Fairbrother, was on that team, and the wrestling coach had just PCS'd, and they had no wrestling coach. The current coach was a teacher and a mom that was just doing it so that they'd have somebody, but the kids were coaching themselves.
No.
So I got ordered to leave work and be a wrestling coach. And I was pissed because I was like, man, like I've already given enough to this fucking sport. Well, then for the first time I was a coach, and I had kids that were looking up to me and that needed something from me. And all of the lessons that I had learned, all the skills I had acquired that I thought were useless, now were, incredibly valuable to these kids who were great people. And, we ended up winning the European championships, and Jonathan Fairbrother was European champion. And that's cool. But like the cool part was actually, I fell in love with the sport again, and it became about process. As an example, I'm short and stocky. So my entire wrestling style was blast doubles, aggressive singles, throws, like, come at you. Well, Jonathan was tall and lanky, relatively speaking to me, but for his weight, tall and lanky.
Yeah.
So he had to play more of a front headlock game. That wasn't my game. I had to learn it and ask other people and look up, YouTube wasn't huge at the time because, again, I'm old, but like look up videos and stuff. And like I did all this research on parts of the sport that weren't even important to me. And now, many years later, when I'm wrestling with kids, they're like, Coach Nick, your front headlock game is disgusting. Like, was that what you ran when you wrestled? Like, no, I mean, not ever. And I'm not learning this stuff anymore because I'm not going to wrestle ever again. Like, I'm almost 50.
You still have your singlet? Is it?
Oh yeah. If you need me in a singlet,
sure.
I'm there. I mean, I'm not afraid. But
next episode.
But because it's now about process. I enjoy the process of learning wrestling, even though, my time has long since passed. Well, I enjoy the process of making videos. I enjoy the process of storytelling. I enjoy the process of writing. And so if you think about it like that, then the act of doing it is the victory. And the results, both good and bad, doesn't make your work any more or less valuable. And I think it's really important for people, especially people that don't have audience yet, right? Like, I know a lot of people that have written books that only 50, 100 people have read. That doesn't mean that their work is not worthwhile. It means that they're not good at marketing.
Right.
Or maybe it means they're not good at writing yet, but they wrote a book and now they have to get to the next, like, okay, what did I learn? You know, if you look at like Ryan Holiday, who, you know, I've been fortunate enough to know for a long time, he's huge now. Every book that he puts out is an instant New York Times bestseller. I mean, that wasn't always the case. I knew him when he was hanging out with Tucker Max, you know, kind of helping him edit.
Trust me, I'm lying.
Yeah. And he was sleeping on a mattress, you know?
So Nick, I'm seeing a connection here with what you're telling us, especially as you became the coach, and in your show, you are basically the mentor to the main character.
That's right.
The main character calls you. He says he wants to see how you're doing, right? Because officers need to feel like they are giving advice.
Yeah.
But I mean, you are like his Jiminy Cricket per se.
That's right.
You know, his conscience. And that's basically how you went through. It sounds like how you went through life. You know, you were the coach. You actually show these kids who didn't have direction how to do something. Yeah. Was that the mindset when you were making the show?
I don't think that highly of myself, where I think I'm like providing, you know, vast wisdom or anything. I have failed a lot. I have a lot of failure in my life. You know, I have a great marriage now, but I failed at a marriage, right? And so I know a lot about what to do wrong in marriage, right? I have a great business now, but even though I've never failed at a business, I came awfully close a couple times with Ranger Up. You know, I've said dumb things. I've been too drunk in my life. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And, you know, I think what you're supposed to do as you get older is say, like, listen, I'm not sitting here telling you like I have all the answers, but what I usually tell people is I give fantastic advice unless your name is Nick Palmesano. And then in which case, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And that's why you need to have a group of people around you that you do trust that can provide you advice. Because when you're in it, I've got a buddy, and I won't go into names, but he's going through a pretty brutal divorce right now. And I'm fortunate. My ex-wife and I are very close. We're good friends. She's a great mom. Like, we had there's no such thing as an idyllic divorce. We had a very good divorce in that we did it the right way. We prioritized our kids. My buddy is going through literally the opposite of that, where, you know, fabricated stories and, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff. I've been able to give him a lot of advice. I've been able to kind of guide him through the process, and he's now on the other end of it. And he's like incredibly thankful. And he's like, man, like, did you just know this stuff? And I was like, no, when I was going through a divorce, and I was going through a nice one, I felt like the worst human being in the world, a colossal failure. You know, how could I be here? You know, because when you're in it, you cannot see that it is temporary.
Right.
And that's one of the things, you know, with veterans and you know, veteran suicide and, you know, one of the reasons why I really wanted to do Office Joe is just to remind everybody that this is common, that, you know, you are probably going to feel weird when you get out, you know, like you haven't quite figured it out. Maybe you're the best times of your life are behind you. That's not true. You know, life tends to get better as it goes on. As long as you're constantly working on yourself and on things, and you're setting goals and you're moving forward and you're surrounding yourself with good people. And I'm not one of these guys. Like, some people are like, you've got to, if you want to be rich, surround yourself with all rich people. And if you want to be smart, surround yourself with all smart people. I think you need to surround yourself with people of high character that have goals. And you're not going to all hit your goals, and you're not going to all hit your goals on the same timeline. And some people are going to do better and some people are going to do worse. But, if everyone around you is trying to do meaningful things and putting work in, that's your group. That's what you want. You want people around you that are like trying to do good things. And that's the tribe you want to build. And a lot of times, some of those people are people that you served with, and some of those people are people that served elsewhere maybe in a different generation, but they're still there for you.
When you have your group of people around you, or you've built the collective people around you over the years, and I'm sure it's changed and people have gone in and out of the group.
Sure.
Do you have a way of, because we've talked about this on the podcast before a few times, and it's kind of one of those things, like you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around with, not meaning if you want to be rich, hang around with rich people, but like you said, people with character, people who have values and morals and have goals.
Yes.
Have you ever had to, at some point, drastically cut off a relationship with somebody because they were just poison to the group? And how did you go about approaching that?
I am now very direct. So when there's a problem, I typically will say instantly, and not in an aggressive way. I think one of the things that happens when you've made a lot of mistakes yourself is that you're not overly judgmental. So I don't necessarily look at somebody and say, I'm better than this person. I look at somebody and say, the behavior that you are currently displaying is not good for me, my organization, my friends, whatever. Like, is there something going on? And either you get, an answer to that question and you kind of resolve whatever is going on so that you can go back to having like a good relationship, or you find out that you actually don't have a good relationship. There haven't been many people in my life where I've had to cut them out, but there have been a few, and some of them really hurt because they were people that I really cared about and still do care about, but the way that they operate is not conducive to how I operate. So, I prefer direct. I try really hard not to talk about people, even if people don't like me. There's something that I've said for a long time. Your opinion of me is none of my business. I've been in the public eye for a while. So every once in a while, there'll be somebody that really hates me, and that's okay. Maybe I was a villain in their lives. I don't ever try to be, but maybe I did something that rubbed them the wrong way, or maybe they're going through something and I just happen to be the person that's visible when they're thinking, or maybe they're like, I did way more than that guy did in the military. Why does anybody care what he thinks? And, it doesn't matter. Right. Like, so, their opinion of me is none of my business. But with that, I try not to talk about people. If somebody's like, oh, so-and-so sucks and he doesn't like you and he said this, and I'm just kind of like, if he wants to talk to me about it, that's cool. But otherwise, I'm not super interested in like getting into it. And it is hard sometimes, with social media. It's a good way to take it though. What are you going to do? You're going to spend time worrying about what, somebody that I don't know, doesn't like me or doesn't like my friend, or, I forget who said this. I think it was like Tom Hardy or something, like, if you don't like me or you're mad at me, give me a call. And if you don't have my phone number, you don't know me well enough to not like me. Yeah, I thought that was pretty damn good.
Well, let me see if this is the same as me. So you mentioned that you're now very direct, right? Do you think that that comes with age?
Yes, because what I have found is, I grew up at a time where, you typically gave feedback in like compliment sandwiches. We were almost taught that, like tell somebody, hey man, going back to the military, hey man, you're really great. You're really great on road marches and, but hey, like, your gear's always fucked up and, but like, okay, once they absorb that, but you've been great with your room or whatever, kind of like this bullshit. And it's like, why are you talking to them? You're talking to them because their gear's been messed up. So just say that, hey, your gear's messed up. I need it fixed. I'm totally blanking on his name right now, but I was,
don't say Vic Delazor.
No. When I was at,
he's all messed up. This guy.
When I was at grad school, the General Electric CEO came to give us a speech, and I feel terrible. I can't remember his name because he's one of the big ones that everybody knows. But he was like, man, isn't it terrible how brutal we grade kids? From kindergarten until they're done with college. We are very comfortable telling them you're an A, you're a B, you're an F, you're a whatever. And then, they become adults and we are uncomfortable telling them they're an F, they're a D, they're a C minus, until they've been a D or a C minus for so long that we fire them. And then it's a surprise and we've rocked their entire world. Well, they may have been a very different person if right away, instead of talking to each other about them, we said, hey, Bob, you're doing a real crappy job with these reports and I need it to be to this standard. If you have any questions, let me know. Bob may not have known he was doing a terrible job. He might be like, oh my God, I didn't even know this was important. And then you get to see what Bob does. If Bob fixes it, Bob's a great employee. If he doesn't fix it, well, then you have your answer. But most people talk to each other about other people instead of talking to them. And it may seem cruel in the moment, but the real cruelty is not giving somebody the opportunity to perform when they could have. And so I always think about that. And so I always, try to be very direct. And I actually, not that you asked, but when my wife and I, before we got married, we, again, you get older, going through divorce once sucked. I don't want to do it again. We kind of made the pledge, like we're always going to be incredibly honest, even if it's hurtful. And I'll tell you what, it's hurtful for 5 minutes, maybe a day. But you realize either like, oh, actually, once I talked it out, I was wrong. Or she goes, you know what, you're right. Or you find a middle ground, but then it's over instead of carrying it with you and carrying it with you and carrying it with you. And that's what ends up happening with employees and friends and everybody. It's like you don't address something, it becomes a fungus that keeps growing and never goes away. Whereas you address it, you're going to get to a conclusion one way or the other, and that conclusion will be better off for everybody.
Nick, you've just given me a great idea. I'm going to go around and just give people grades based on the service they give me. Like, no shit. I'm going to go to Starbucks. Hey, you didn't get it right. Fucking F. No, I'm just going to give people grades, dude. I'm going to make it legit. I'm going to go on Canva and print out an actual report card and just give people that stuff. Like, hey, or just slap it on their forehead. Here you go.
Well, it's weird because I've been in creative projects for a while. It's one of the only places where people are comfortable giving you a grade.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I love your show, or your show sucks, or your movie sucks, or your book sucks, or whatever it is. It's like people have and so many hours and weeks and months and years go into these projects, and people are just like, bleh, and it's no like.
Dude, it's like the same in the military. Dude, I remember standing in front of a sergeant major and he asked me if I'm fat. And what am I going to say? I'm like I know that no is the wrong answer. I'm like, yes.
As long as you're making
You know?
a Sergeant Major sandwich, you're good.
Yeah.
Sergeant Major, yes, Sergeant Major.
Yes, Sergeant Major. I'm fat Sergeant. It was like on a Marine of the Quarter panel or something like that, and he just asked me if I'm fat. I'm like, yes. I don't know.
I like to think of it as pleasantly plump, Sergeant.
Yeah, pleasantly plump, right? I'm just happy. You know, that's what it is. Fluffy.
I want to ask you also, in the time that you've been doing film with your media company, building all this stuff up, like, do you have a vision for where it's going to be, or are you just going to go through it and keep making creative projects and keep doing what you're doing without that like 10-year plan in mind? Because I really hate it when people ask me what a 10-year plan is, and I think it's dumb.
I don't make them anymore because they've never come true. I've literally never been able to guess what I was going to do even in 5 years, never mind 10. But what I always do is I always have something I'm working on. So I always have a project that is around my business, and then I have a project that is outside of my business. So typically that looks like I'm writing right now. It looks like I'm either planning a movie or a TV show, and I'm writing a book. Excuse me. Or I'm planning some kind of nonprofit project, or I always have two things going. And I found more than two things, and I start doing C+, B- work everywhere. Two things keeps me really busy, and fundamentally I'm a lazy person. So I need to be overwhelmed just a little to give my best. Otherwise I'll happily sit on the couch and watch movies and TV because I enjoy it. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, that's great. I asked that because there's a lot of times, again, going on that transition from the military to civilian, even any transition in life, but military civilian specifically, like Vic's been through it. I've been through it. I took 3 years off of work and did a lot of other things in between, volunteering and doing this podcast and all kinds of other stuff. And I find myself, and I think Vic has mentioned it before as well, like we find ourselves in this position where we have this free time, but then we want to fill the free time, but then we fill the bucket too much, and then we got to draw back a little bit, and we got to kind of figure out where that happy medium is. And that's why
it's hard. There's I've gotten it wrong so many times that it's, a lot of very smart people say the most important word that you should have in your vocabulary is no. And I have traditionally had a problem with that. And I'm trying like the last couple of years, I've really tried hard to say no more, even when they were things I was excited about. And so my business partner, Albert, he likes to say it's either a hell yes or it's a no. And so, there are going to be a lot of things in life, especially if you start winning at a couple of things, where people are going to approach you and say like, hey, we should do this together. We should have this project together. We should, join my business or join this. But there's an opportunity cost with all of those things. And so some of my friends have done really amazing things that they've asked me to be involved in. And I said no, and it's not like they didn't go on to success, because they did, and some of them far more success than I have. But it wasn't something that I was truly going to be able to give 100% to. And I was able to do things that are very valuable to me as a result of saying no. Sometimes when you say yes, you are saying no to another opportunity that's more important to you. And so, especially as I get older and realize, that time moves at 1 second per second, and that, I'm on the wrong end of that now, unless I'm really fortunate, which is unlikely. I need to really be judicious with the time that I have left. Like, what do I want to do? And so just like I walked away from a great job at a great company and didn't look back. I try to do the same thing with yes and no to projects. Like, do I really want to be involved in this? Do I think that I can meaningfully contribute? Can I get excited about this work every day, even if I don't feel like working that day? Will I grind through it? You know, what am I willing to give up to do this? That's the big question. What am I willing to give up to do this? And if the answer is not much, don't do it.
That's excellent, man. And Nick, we have a question here from somebody that in the chat here. It says, how have your post-Army tribes compared to your military tribes? Have you had renewed feelings of camaraderie that you initially missed in the Army? From Rob N.
Yeah, you know, a lot of my post-military tribe are veterans, not necessarily veterans I served with, but a lot of people. So I'll give you an example. You know, I don't know if he wants to be public, or I'll just use his first name. His name is Jimmy. One of the guys I talk to a lot about life. You know, Jimmy, it was a, you know, he's just a smidge older than me. So he was like, you know, Cold War era veteran. I knew Jimmy for 8 years through jujitsu. We were like jujitsu friends before I even knew he was a vet. But we talked about kids, we talked about work, we talked about, and then, you know, literally one day he was like, yeah, when I was in the 82nd, I was like, what are you talking about? Because that's not, you know, he served for, you know, 4 or 5 years in the 82nd, and, you know, he's now, you know, an executive at IBM, and he that was a piece of his life. I didn't even know that. So it's not like I was planning on making like a veteran friend. He just happened to be like a good dude that I rolled with, that helped me with jujitsu because he's better than I am. And yeah, you know, and so you kind of build different friend groups for different things. And a lot of my friends I've made through, you know, through helping them do things like, you know, guys that were introduced to me by somebody else that were like, hey, you know, Nick, so-and-so is trying to do this thing. And then I was impressed by them as human beings, and, you know, and they tried to pay it back at some point, you know, by helping with X, Y, or Z. And it's not like I don't keep score, you know, I don't ever, because there are people that have helped me in life that I will never be able to repay in a meaningful way. They are so successful. They're so rich. They're so everything. Like, there's nothing I could do meaningful to like improve their life. And so I have to say, like, just thank you. But then I have to, like, the way I look at it is I can't help them. I can be appreciative, and I tell them all the time, thanks for that time when you helped me. But I can help somebody that's 20 something that's just getting out. I can help the 30 something guy going through a divorce. I can help, you know, and sometimes that's it. It's like, you know, do people make your life better or not is kind of the question, you know, and am I making their life better or not? So there are no equitable relationships. Like, no, you know, I mean, I don't know, you know, Vic and John, like, I don't know if, you know, I'm sure there have been times where Vic has been the bigger help and times where John's been the bigger help. And, you know, sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. I do know that I gauge my friendships when I'm down. Because I'll tell you, when Ranger Up was at the top, I had a lot of friends. Right. And then when Ranger Up was going through crisis, I had about 5. And then
that's how it happens, huh?
And then Ranger Up started doing well again, and a whole bunch of people started showing up. And it's not like I don't care. I'm not mad. But you now know. You know, the people that turn up when things are bad are the people that are your friends. Everybody else is an acquaintance, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't have acquaintances, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't help acquaintances. But it's important to know who's really on your team. And that's only determined when things are not going well.
No, 100%, man. I mean, how many times have any of us reached out to somebody and they're like, oh, you know, I don't have the time.
Yeah.
When things are bad, you know, when things are good, hey, congratulations, let's be on the same team here.
Yeah.
You know, and you
Yeah,
can spot that a
also-
mile away.
It also, but this is the next step of that. You also can't judge them for not wanting to help because you just may not be their priority and you just didn't realize it. You
Right.
can't prioritize everybody. Like, I'm willing to help everybody, but there are levels to it, right? So like, you know, my ride or dies, whatever they need that I can give without hurting my family, I will do it. My acquaintances, like, listen, I'll give you time, I'll give you advice, you know, maybe I'll give you money if there's like if it's a good plan or something. But you see, there's a continuum and there's nothing wrong with that. So, but it's important to kind of, you know, you don't want to be in a situation where you think somebody is a ride or die and then like they're not there. And so it's, you know, it's just kind of always assessing like what's around you, like, and who, you know, but, you know, looking at like some of my friends have millions of followers, right? I will never be able to reciprocate with, if they have something that they're going to launch, I'll share it and all that. But my sharing it is not going to be as big for them as them sharing something for me. But on the flip side, you know, if they need something written or they need video made or they need, like, I can do that in a way that they can't. And so, you know, there will be an ebb and flow to who is helping the most in any relationship. And if you keep score, you get in trouble. You start thinking about things the wrong way.
Yeah.
But if the other person is never providing any value in your life, and I don't mean in business, just in your life, well, then maybe they don't need to be part of that circle.
I wanted to ask you real quick, when you were getting out, because you said you did six years in the military, right?
Yeah.
When you were thinking about getting out, when did that first thought of getting out, did you already have that predetermined? And how much effort did you put into it on the way out the door of the military?
So it was tough. I joined the military with the intention of being in for 20, at least. I had a couple of officers in my life that had such a negative impact that I did not want to be, because as an enlisted guy, you can get a bad mark and still hit all of your goals.
Yep.
As an officer, you know, one non-exceptional OER after captain, and you're done. You're not going to get to whatever it is you want. And so that to me was such an absurd proposition, because I had already, I'd already had a few people that I wouldn't hire, never mind put my life, you know, my career in their hands. That was one piece of it. The second piece of it was my ex-wife, and I always say I don't blame her for this at all. She's like, I will completely support you in the military as long as you want to stay in, but I don't want to have kids while you're in. So we're not going to start a family until you make the decision to get out. And her reasoning was, one, I don't want to be a single mom. And two, you are so kid centric, and I always have been, that if you have to, you know, if you have to deploy for a year and not be around, you know, your 1-year-old, your 2-year-old, it's going to break you. And I actually think she was completely right about that. And so the combination of those two things is what led me to the decision. And once I made the decision, then I started planning. I said, hey, I'm gonna, one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to get into like a top 10 business school, or I'm going to, you know, get a job for a year or two and then try to get into a top 10 business school. So I concurrently, I can try to remember, I think it was called Bradley Morris or something. It was like one of those, headhunting firms. So I did the Bradley Morris seminar, built my resume, did all that stuff in case, looking at that as an option. And then I also applied to Harvard and Duke and was planning on applying to more. But I got into Duke right away and then was like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. And, got out. So.
Do you ever look back and wonder, like, what if you would have stayed in for 20?
Yes.
What your life would have looked like then?
Yeah.
Would you have been able to do your, diesel media part-time? Tell me about that.
It is a constant, my friends, I have friends that are Medal of Honor recipients. I have friends that are special operations I have friends that were CAG. I have, guys that I really love to death. And there are definitely times in the past where I've been like, man, like, should I have taken that path? Should I have, chased those dreams? And I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer in life. I do know that in the weirdest imaginable way, I've been able to have more of an impact than I ever would have been able to have, I think, in uniform, out of uniform. I'm not even telling you it makes sense, because as a guy that sold t-shirts that was a known quantity, I've had opportunities that, general officers don't get. Like, it's really weird. We live in a weird world. And to be fair, half the things I've been involved in, I should have no business being involved in. But I have a lot of reps that are atypical for our community that have allowed me to do things that other people in our community can't do. If you stay in for too long as an officer, I don't think it's as true for enlisted guys, but as an officer, you stay in for too long, you learn a certain way of thinking.
Right.
There are rules. You have to treat people this way. This person's important, that person's important. This is the structure. I don't give a fuck about any of that stuff. Like, none of it. When Jared Taylor and I wanted to make a movie and Hollywood was like, all the different firms we went to were like, you can't do it this way. You can't do it that way. We were like, well, why not? So we went to crowdfunding, and there, everyone was like, you can't crowdfund for a movie. Well, then we raised $1.5 million. And then it was like, okay, well, nobody's going to be in it. And it was like, well, I'm going to write a letter to William Shatner. And it was like, well, you can't just write a letter to an actor. No one's ever going to answer that. And then he answered and was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I can go on and on and on. And it's like, the only reason that Jared and I and the team of, Matt Best and Tim and all, the only way we were successful is by not giving a shit about what the rules were. We learned the rules. Okay, these are the rules. Let's try to play within the rules. Well, in the rules, you're not allowed to do it. Well, screw that. Like, I'm going to do it. Let's just figure out a new way to do it.
Yep.
And so when you're, again, when I say these things, because I know there's going to be somebody that like blasts back, I'm not saying that every officer that stayed in for 20 years is like that. But in my experience, because my classmates are all colonels and generals, as with all things, there is a way of thinking that comes with a job. And so if you're in long enough, I mean, why do all sergeants major sound the same? Why are they focused on things like the grass, right? It's like they're trained. They are trained to think that way. And so if you're in for a period of time, you're going to be trained to think in the way of your job. Like, just like, all electricians probably have a certain, structure for how they think. Yeah. Engineers approach problems in a similar way. Well, to be an effective, whatever the hell I am, it is important to certainly like know the rules and try to figure out the rules, but also you can't let the rules keep you from a solution. And that's the way my mindset is. And for better, for worse, again, I'm not like, this isn't me going, I'm special. It's just me saying, I chose a path that, you know, kept me from accomplishing certain things that would have been important to me. But if I hadn't chosen this path, I wouldn't be able to do these other things that are important to me. And so, like, you know, everything we do is a decision. You make a decision, you keep moving forward, right? Like, you know, could have married a different woman. My life might have been good, but different. Like, does that mean I shouldn't have married my wife? You know, and it's like, we can do this with literally everything.
Yep.
So it's almost like a useless endeavor. And anytime I start going down that path, it's like, you know, the time has passed. I made the decision. I got out. I did these things. Like, you know.
That's a very refreshing way of thinking about it. Like, you just do it. And especially like when you mentioned, hey, you know, Hollywood's telling you can't do something. Well, I mean, were you prior enlisted?
No, but
no. Okay. So I was prior.
My dad was enlisted. And so I do think that some of that, you know, rubbed off.
Yeah.
Like,
and I was going to say, I was prior enlisted now. That's spoken like a true E3, right? Let's bend the rules here and figure out a way to do something. Hey, yeah, Sergeant said I can't go out from the barracks. Well, let's have a freaking party at the barracks, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a very, very refreshing way of thinking about it, because a lot of people get held back from that. You know, like, I can't do it. And how many times I've encountered that, especially talking to people about finding your passion, your purpose. I'm going to leave the military and I really want to do this, but I can't. I'm like, well, why can't you? Because this, you know, there's just a bunch of excuses.
That's right.
I'm like, well, get that shit out of your head and just try it out, dude.
Just go
do
it.
Yeah, just go do it. It's like the clipboard effect, right? You grab a clipboard. They say that you can get into anywhere with a freaking clipboard, right? So I'm going to try that out this weekend, actually. But no, it's all to say that it's a very refreshing way, and anybody out there listening, that, you know, you really could do anything if you just attempted to do it.
You can do it. Yeah.
If there was one or two things that you would want people to know about the TV series who haven't seen it, I mean, we played the trailer, of course, so hopefully people got a glimpse of it. I've watched it through twice. I actually had to, so just a disclaimer for everybody out there, if you're in Europe and you want to check it out and you go buy it on Amazon and you try to turn on your VPN and it doesn't allow you to stream it, then you're going to have to go to Google Play and buy it there and get it and stream it through your VPN. And now our sponsor, VPN. No, I'm just kidding. But if you're using a VPN, if you're in Europe and you want to check it out, actually, I was going to ask you that as well, but I'll ask that later. If there are one or two things that you would want people to know about Office Joe, like purpose, why you did it, the best part that you don't want to give away as a spoiler, like
I did it. I did it for two reasons. One, I wanted to make something creative. I wanted to have fun. I have had a challenging few years emotionally with everything that I do with Save Our Allies. You know, from Afghanistan to time in Pakistan to, you know, all these. It's heavy work, and it's we had people in safe houses starting in 2022 that the last of them finally got to the US a month ago.
Wow.
So the work involved in that has been staggering. And then I'm still getting messages from people in Afghanistan that we can't help. And it's incredibly frustrating and heavy. And so, you know, I needed something that wasn't work in the traditional sense, that was for me. So that's the selfish part. And then the selfless part is I felt like our whole community kind of felt that way. And that everything is always like, well, this is bad and that is bad. And, you know, like, veteran suicide is up, and, Afghanistan is a failure. And, maybe they're going to make cuts to, disability payments, and like, it's just a constant negative, I was like, well, fuck that. Like, what like we are actually a really stellar community, and and I mean that in the broadest sense. Like I'm talking about, you know, Vietnam, Cold War, Korea, you know, GWAT, pre-GWAT, post-GWAT, you know, it's a great group of people that are not afraid to get their hands dirty and make a difference. You know, when everything happened in Western North Carolina, Save Our Allies until North Carolina has not, we've never done anything domestic. It's always been overseas, but it's in our backyard. So, you know, we went out, we put together, you know, some great teams. We did search and rescue work. And now we, you know, we literally have a warehouse that's in Western North Carolina where we, you know, we're bringing supplies to families. My 10-year-old was an elf this weekend with Hollywood Hurd, who was he's an Air Force pilot that works for me. He's the head of our video department. Hollywood's in his mid 60s, and he was a fantastic Santa Claus. And we had a helicopter with you know, my son Max and Hollywood, and they flew around and they dropped off presents for kids that have nothing right now because their entire lives were washed away, you know? So like, you know, who showed up day one when Western North Carolina was hit with a storm that only comes around once a millennium? All vets. Now, I'm not talking about organizations. I'm talking about dudes in pickup trucks with winches, you know, wearing grunt style t-shirts, you know, wearing nine, like they're not sitting there going, I'm a vet. They're like, how do I help? And you're like, I know who you are.
I think it's because a mindset of service, like you want to continue to serve.
Because, you know, again, despite the fact that we have a tendency to eat our own every once in a while, it's a pretty great community. And it's a community that is capable of making a difference, that wants to make a difference, that isn't afraid. I mean, again, you know, we talked about this before, people being afraid to jump into entrepreneurship. Did you ever know what the hell you were supposed to do in the military? Like, I mean, like, yeah, like we're trained. I
still don't know.
We're trained for a certain mission, right? But like, when were you at, I mean, how often were you doing the mission, and how often were you doing something dumb that you've never done before? You know, like,
yeah,
you know, we had to learn how to roof because the roof on our hard site was leaking rat feces, and you know, it's like there were rats in the roof. And so my platoon sergeant went up there with an industrial shop vac and vacuumed up a bunch of rats. And then we, you know, we figured out kind of how to roof. Like, it's a silly thing, right? But it's like, that's not in the training, you know. That's
no, it's that saying, right? Figure it out. That's like
figure it out. Yeah. So so, you know, we are the perfect entrepreneurs, and we just don't realize it. You know, we don't typically quit. You know, we have a figure it out mentality. We're not afraid to be uncomfortable. You know, we don't typically lie to ourselves for too long, and we admit, like, hey, maybe I'm not doing this the right way. We've been trained to take feedback, so we can actually listen to mentors. I'll tell you that one of the big issues with non-veteran entrepreneurs is they typically love their idea so much that they can't handle getting feedback. Well, as a veteran, that's not in your DNA. It's like you expect feedback. You're not going into it saying my idea is so perfect it's going to work out brilliantly right out of the gate. You're like, I'm going to have to iterate because that's the way it is. I'm going to have to get better at this. You know, so we're the perfect entrepreneurs. We just don't realize it. Veteran entrepreneurs outperform all other groups. No one ever talks about it. We are the most successful cohort of entrepreneurs.
That's excellent insight, man. Because a lot of the folks that I know who actually run the businesses here, and I live in San Diego. I mean, there's a huge concentration of veteran-owned businesses and nonprofits here. Yeah. So you can't throw a rock without actually hitting one of those.
Yeah, and they tend to, not always, they tend to help each other.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever I need something, I just reach out to folks, right? Nonprofits and stuff. I know these folks. I talk back and forth. They know what I do. I know what they do. And, I'm always willing to help out. It just comes with a community, sense of community there.
Yeah. One of the reasons that we ended up doing the movie with the Article 15 guys back in the day is because we used to share, Matt Best and Jared's videos on Ranger Up. And, before they were big, that was like, they gained a lot of fans from that back in the day. And Matt felt so bad when they decided they were going to launch their own t-shirt brand that he called. And he was like, hey man, like, I don't want to like piss you off or, think that I'm not grateful, but we're starting our own t-shirt company. I was like, oh, that's awesome, man. Like, that's great. And he was like, oh, you don't care? I was like, why would I care? Like, I mean, I'd appreciate it if you didn't like steal our designs, but and they, their stuff was so unique. It was so different than what we were doing. And so then because of that reaction, Jared then wanted to do the, cause it was Jared that originally wanted to do the film, and they kind of knew, hey, we haven't had as many business reps. So they reached out and they're like, hey, why don't we do this together? Kind of 50-50. And, but they said, like, we never would have done that if your reaction had been different. And so, that's where, that's really like the foundation of our friendship is it was like when they were starting their company, I was like, yeah, hit me up if you have any questions. And, you're
just willing to help. That's it.
Want to help. But they are, now, they're running $1 billion company. And I was like, Jared, do you want to be in the show? And he's like, hell yeah. Like, I can be here these dates or these dates or these. He doesn't have to do that. Dude lives on a compound with a race car. And he's out, he's out doing Office Joe, So I think the community is really great if you're great to it. If you are a person that is out there trying to do good things. I mean, I very rarely have had anybody say, no, I'm not going to help. And if they do, it's usually like, like Matt wanted to be in the show. He couldn't make it. He had some serious stuff going on. He's like, is there any way I can do it this other date? And we were going to be done by then. And I was like, don't worry about it. Like season 2, So I'm not saying that people are going to drop everything, but you call, you want advice, you want, whatever. I mean, I just have not had the experience of people typically saying no.
That's awesome, man.
So,
Nick,
but
I want to ask you.
That's special. I think that's just about anybody.
I want to ask you what, in making the show, and I've seen a couple episodes so far, and they're pretty damn funny. What is your favorite part of making this show?
Oh, I'm torn between episode 4 and episode 6. So, because we were self-funding, we couldn't make every episode huge. So just like with the Office or Parks and Rec, most of the episodes kind of happen inside the office, right? Most of the conversations happen there. The major expense in filmmaking is changing locations. And so we had to kind of choose a couple of spots where we were going to do a lot of location changes. And so those were episodes 4 and 6, which I think are the 2 best episodes. Episode 4 is just so outrageous. That's traditionally the one people usually say that was the funniest episode. And then episode 6 has the biggest message. And I think it was shot really well. And I think we were really in our groove because we shot pretty much sequentially. So we were really in our groove by episode 6. It's also the longest by a pretty wide margin. But, when I think about moments that like things that I really loved, so I would say Jared Taylor and Austin Mandatory Fun Day Letkeman as the recruiters. No. I love their interaction. I knew they were going to do it, so I wrote those characters with them in mind. And I think that's one of my favorite kind of running gags. Yeah. Somebody that went to the premiere compared them to the two dudes in the Muppets that kind of
like the old dudes up in the top.
Yeah, up in the and just talking shit the whole time. They were amazing. Fat Tim Kennedy is definitely one of my favorites. Mary Daig, Mary Daig is if you don't know who she is, she was an EOD tech that lost both of her arms. And she's an incredible actress, and she always likes to play weird characters. And so she's a gang leader, so to speak, at a rival marketing company. She plays like a really brutal villain. She's one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. There's a lot of things that were great. Vince Vargas as, Joe's guardian angel.
Mm-hmm.
He does a great job. Ashley Gutermuth shows up in earnest in episode 6. She's great. There's, and I also love Jack and Eric Tansey as the EMT and cop, kind of that pair, and
yeah.
So
now I'm gonna have to go back and watch these, because I stopped at episode 3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now I got to watch episode 4 now. So you got me hooked.
Yeah, man. I look at it like episode 1 and 2, you're kind of getting introduced to the characters.
Right.
Episode 3, we're off to the races. Episode 4, we really hit our groove. Episode 5, we introduced Jack Mandeville's character, and episode 5 that's the one don't watch with your kids, because
NSFW.
Don't watch episode 5 with your kids. Watch it yourself first, and then make whatever judgment. And then episode 6 is my personal favorite, but 4 is nipping at its heels. They're close. Those 2 episodes are stellar.
Oh man! All right, I got it. I'm gonna have to watch it. But it seems like all the characters mesh well together. It's like, did you have a tough time finding people who fit those parts?
We were so lucky, man. Honest to God, because there's 3 movies. This is something Ross Patterson from Drinking Bros always says to me. There's 3 movies. There's the one you write, there's the one you shoot, and there's the one you edit, and they're completely different movies. And the only one you really have true control over is the writing. I wrote this and I was the director, but once it's in the actor's hands, they're going to create something that they see in their minds, and you can steer them, but you're never going to see exactly what you originally thought of. And I was really fortunate that the actors that we had were incredible, and they found characters inside the characters I had written that I didn't know existed. And I think in every situation they made them better. So I felt blessed, honest to God, felt blessed when I was shooting it. I was like, man, I think we have something. Like, I really think we have something. And then when I saw the first edit, then I knew we did. So,
yeah, that's excellent, man. Yeah, because I liked it. I liked the way that they meshed well together. I mean, the main character Joe, just when it opened up, hey, you can't use a freaking printer. Yeah, and I'm like, oh shit, what's he gonna do?
But all right, you may know already, which of the main characters do you think was the Marine in real life?
Probably the. Oh no, you already mentioned he was Air Force. I was gonna say the older dude. The maybe the little guy. No.
Raph.
Which one's Raph?
Yeah, Raph is the guy, is the very liberal guy that always has a cause. He was a Marine.
Okay, all right. I did not peg him for that. Yeah, I would not have pegged him for that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I was surprised. I was like, break out your DD-214, because he was so good. And that's not his personality at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a really good actor. But yeah, you know, when it was like, yeah, he's a Marine, I was like, what? Like, are you kidding me? He was so good in that role, and he just seems like the softest dude in the world. And yeah, Marine.
Yeah, he reports the other guy for whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's funny. Are all the actors veterans, or are there some that are
About
civilian?
about half.
Okay.
Yeah, about half.
Cool.
With Range 15, almost everybody was a veteran. It's really hard to do. And also, you know, when you're getting people that are going to work nonstop for a month or two on a show, you know, you need people that are professional actors, because not many people can walk away from their lives for,
right,
you know, a couple months. So,
yeah, and this is all filmed in. Yeah, exactly. And this is all filmed in where, North Carolina, or where is this?
Yeah, all filmed in North Carolina.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you actually had pretty much your whole family involved with this. Like that's
well,
for me, that was a really cool thing.
I'll tell you what happened. My my wife kind of plays the second lead. She did not want to, and that was never the plan. She's never acted other than in skits with me every once in a while. When we were doing our first read through of the show, you know, like internally, just, you know, Diesel Jack Company, just to kind of see, like, what do we think? She was, you know, we all took parts, and she chose to be Karen. And so everybody's looking around while she's reading it. Like, we're all looking at each other, and she's reading it. It wasn't written for an English person or anything.
Right.
And we were like, holy shit, this is good. Like, she's really good.
She fits that. Yeah.
It took like 3 or 4 weeks to convince her, because she was like, no, I will not do it. You know, like, and I don't really have an English. I Dick Van Dyke all of it, but I you know, but yeah, she ultimately, because everyone but me was like, you've got to do it, she begrudgingly said she would do it. And then when it came to, so we had somebody that got hurt on set doing something that wasn't like a stunt or anything. And then I had the fear of God running through me, because we still had to film the big bar fight scene, which has a lot of stunts. And so I'm like, man, who do I trust that is not going to get hurt? And like, my kids are all really good athletes. They're all combat athletes. They all, so, you know, in that bar fight, like the little, you know, the little, I can't say girl anymore, she's almost 18, but you know, the little woman that jumps through the air, like 4 feet through the air and lands on Joe's back and attacks him and then gets thrown. That's my daughter. You know, she's a state place finisher in wrestling, going into her senior year. The kid that you know, slips a couple punches and hits Joe 3 or 4 times, that's my, you know, 16-year-old son. You know, the little kid playing guitar in every gang scene in episode 4, that's my son Max. You know, my other daughter plays a barista in episode 2. You know, like, so all my kids,
whole family there.
Yeah, got the whole family, except for the one that's currently deployed. You know, my oldest is currently deployed. But yeah, everybody that was physically present is in the show in some form or fashion. So
that's cool, man. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it was fun. You know, it was fun.
How far do you think you're going to go with it? You're going to keep doing it? Because I know you said self-funded, crowdfunded.
Yeah. It's showing, you know, it really depends on, you know, I mean, I will always make new stuff. I want to make season 2. I'm ready to do it. You know, we have to have a little more success with this one right now. It's going well. We probably need to, you know, triple or quadruple the sales that we have now, or, you know, or land a contract with Netflix or Amazon or somebody like that before we, you know, green light season 2. but we feel confident. Like I'm very confident season 2 is going to happen. It's just a matter of, the show's only been out for a little while, and the times have changed. So Range 15, people used to buy things, DVDs were popular. People bought, and now we're all kind of programmed to, I'll wait for it to be free. Well, the problem with that is it's only free if somebody buys, literally buys a license to use it for some period of time. And we came really close with Netflix before we launched. We weren't even going to have it for sale. And they kind of said, well, there's no big actors in it that we know, even though the people in this are well known in the veteran community. And so they're kind of watching how it's doing. And it's doing well. We've had thousands of people buy it. So it's not like we're, we launched and nothing happened, but it's expensive. Making a show is expensive. And unlike a few years ago, it's also why you see so few movies coming out in Hollywood. There's no DVD sales anymore of any substance.
Right.
So you have to make all of your money through the initial launch or through licenses, or if you launch in the theater, or else you're never going to make it back. Whereas when you think about, remember the movie Office Space?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Office Space
was still on VHS back then.
Didn't go profitable. It was a huge bust in the theater, total failure. And then nobody bought the DVD. So it ended up in the $5 bin at Walmart. Well, lots of people bought it in the $5 bin, myself included. And then it became a cult classic. And it still, to this day, makes Mike Judd millions of dollars a year. Because now, via that $5 bin, it became popular, and now it's always streaming somewhere. That opportunity doesn't exist anymore. And so you have to convince people to give it a shot. So it's, again, it's a puzzle to figure out, but for us, it's like, all right, hey, we made a TV show. Thousands of people have purchased it, and all of the reviews are positive, except for one person that gave it a 1. But they did it on IMDb, and with IMDb, you don't actually have to buy it. You can just say whatever you want. So, but on Amazon, where you can only review if you purchased it, we're a perfect 5. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I got to leave my review now.
Yeah. I mean, please do. Reviews matter. With
no, absolutely.
TV and movies, they really matter. So,
yeah.
Are you guys able to hit the AFN market, Europe?
Working on that. I think one of the problems we have is it's essentially a rated R. It's a TV mature, not because it's not like, Range 15 was so far out there that we couldn't even get an R rating with that. That was that if we had rated it, it was going to be an NC-17. But this is like if you've watched any of it, it's like a light R or a heavy PG-13. There's a few F-bombs. And episode 6 has one real crazy moment. But it's approachable. Like, for the most part, I'd say teenagers can watch it without any issue, unless you're if you're a very restrictive parent, which is fine. But parents should definitely watch it before having their kids watch it. But it's not Range 15. It's not wild like that.
Yeah. I'm over here calling my 14-year-old, hey, rewind that, check this out. And he's like, Dad, what the heck is this? I'm like, hey, just watch it, dude. It's good. It's good. No, he liked it. That's good. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so we're coming up on an hour 45. I don't know how much time you had allotted for this. I know we generally take about an hour, and
no worries,
I don't want to steal all of your day today.
No
but
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah,
man.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, man. And dude, if you ever need any ideas for some skits, dude, I've got my mind is just freaking out there, dude, and I'm ready and willing and able.
hey,
So-
season 2 when we have it, come on.
Season 2, man. I'm there.
Let's do it.
So if folks had any questions, or maybe wanted to get a hold of you or something like that, with maybe some ideas or anything, is there any, like, are you on socials or anything like that? You care to share anything?
Yeah. Nick Palmesano on everything except for X. And X, I still have my old handle, Ranger_up.
Okay.
But on everything else, I'm Nick Palmesano. One word.
Awesome, man.
Is there anything we didn't cover that you might want to touch on that may be sitting on a sticky note on your desk that you want to hit?
I've got a book coming out. It's available for pre-order right now that I wrote with Eric Tansey. So Eric plays the cop in Office Joe. He's one of the most ridiculous human beings I've ever met in my life. He's a vet who was in the special operations community. He literally left to chase the girl. The girl did not know he was leaving the military to chase her. By the time he got out, it was 3-4 months later. He had not contacted her, had not told her any of this was happening. She's dating another dude. He shows up. She's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I got out. You said that we couldn't get married because you didn't want to marry somebody in the special operations community. So I got out." And she's like, "You literally got out of the military for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, like, well, don't you think we should have talked about this first?" Anyway, they're married. They have 5 kids. He won the day.
Okay.
Nice.
Good.
But he was like, "What can I do now that I'm out?" Well, I'll be a cop because I bet that'll be easier. And it was not easier.
Not these days, no.
And so he spent 9 years as a cop in the Southeast District of Raleigh. And there's no way to describe Eric Tansey without listening to his stories or reading his stories. And so he came to me. He was on my podcast, which I've paused for a while because I've been really busy. But he was on my podcast, and I was like, "Bro, your stories are so ridiculous that you need to write a book." He's like, "Well, actually, I've been writing short stories. I wrote my short stories down while I was a cop for catharsis, and I've kind of put them together with my wife in a book." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." So I kind of introduced him to my editor, and was like, "Hey, this guy's he's a clown. He is ridiculous. Like, his stories are so ridiculous. I think there's something here, and I wanted to pass it on." And so Amar, who's my editor, comes back and he's like, "Man, like, I can see the gold underneath, It's like, but like he's not, he's a good writer, but he's not like a professional writer. And I don't feel like the humor is coming out as strongly as it could." And I was like, "Yeah, man, that's what I felt like. I thought maybe like you could find somebody that's a good fit." And he goes, "I'll tell you what, I'll give him a contract right now." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome, bro." He's like, "I didn't finish. If you write it." And I was like, because I hadn't planned on, I wasn't a police officer. I hadn't planned on it, and I felt like one of the reasons why I was so effective on Tim's book was because of my service. And, but I was like, all right. So I went back to Eric and I was like, "Here's what he said." And he looked at me doe-eyed. His eyes were like this, "Will you do it?" Like what, like, it's like, "All right, man, let's do it." So, so then we together, kind of reattacked his book, and it's called Pig Latin. And Pig Latin.
Nice.
It's a Simon & Schuster book. It comes out in August, but you can pre-order it now on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And it is a ridiculous ride. There are some serious moments, but I can tell you that Eric does not take himself seriously. Unlike any police book I've ever read, he's not sitting there giving you speeches. He doesn't tell you cops are good or cops are bad. He just tells his stories, and they are insane.
And the reader can make up their own mind.
The book ends with him winning an award for valor and getting fired on the same day.
Okay. All right. Let me add this one to my cart here.
Yeah. So
that's good, man.
Yeah,
Well,
super proud of that, and he's a fantastic human being, and I think he's going to have a lot of big success and go on to do things that are pretty stellar. So
excellent, man. Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. And Nick, thank you for coming on the show, man. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah,
this show is being streamed on LinkedIn, on YouTube, both on the Military Retirement Podcast and the Green Logbook, also on our Facebook page, the Military Retirement Podcast. So yeah, we do appreciate it, and much success to you with the second season. And I got to get on this episode 4 here real quick.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, guys.